Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and my guest today is KERRY YANUSHANUS and a fire extinguisher. She is a dyslexia coach and the thing. Okay, I want you all to listen closely, and right after this, poof!
Dear, I am worried.
What are you worried about, honey? We have everything we need right here.
I'm worried about Toby. Ever since he got his podcast on that one place,
What one place?
tvpbn.com, where he got an instant audience for his podcast. They can listen and view him live at the studio.
And become a guest on the show with Geoffrey Hill? I just read that. So, what's the problem?
Ever since that, he stands out.
Well, honey, that's great, dear. I mean, what are you so concerned with?
You'll see. Yeah. Hey!
Alright. Sup? Looks pretty good, Mom.
So, son, your mother and I were concerned about... Holy f***ing shit! What's wrong with this f***ing head?
Is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning. I've been trying to reach you.
Fire to God!
About a king, and Rither's the match.
I can take care of myself.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left.
I don't care what happens to me.
It's only gonna get worse for you.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart. Hear everything they say, ain't you?
Maybe we're not so different. Who are you under there?
I'm vengeance.
What's black and blue and dead all over?
I got you! I got you!
Welcome back. At the beginning of the show, I introduced my guest who's going to be here in just a second. Her name is KERRY YANUSHANUS. And as I was reading the teleprompter, I experienced a moment of dyslexia, and I attempted to portray what I believe a dyslexic person sees when they read, and that's a lot of mumbo jumbo. I'm going to find out if that's actually true, because you see, my opening monologue wasn't supposed to be so jumbled, you know, the thing. But it was. And we're going to talk about that right now. Welcome to the show, Kerry. I'm so glad that you are here. There she is.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's very cool. So how accurate was my dyslexic opening?
Well, I guess it would depend what level of literacy that dyslexic person reading that prompter would be at. So for example, that sounded like maybe it would be someone at a 70% reading fluency rate. So a lot of times in schools, they're aiming for 80 to 90% literacy. But when you think about that, if you're missing 20% of the script, that's not really literate. That's kind of functionally illiterate, actually.
That's what I was thinking, because if what I said was 70% literate, you couldn't even tell what the heck I'm saying.
Exactly right. You take away 30% of that, you leave a lot of room for guesswork.
I mean, I could see your face, and as I'm introducing this, your face is getting more and more dismayed, going, what the heck?
Well, I was like, is he trying to simulate dyslexia? Because there are actually websites and there's different places you can go to have dyslexia simulated for you so that parents can understand what is going on with their child. So if you think about, if 3 out of every 10 letters isn't recognized, right? If you're at a 70%, literacy rate, you're missing a lot of information. So it's good that parents can understand that experience.
It would be very difficult to follow the story. I love to read. I read about probably a third of a novel per day. It's just fascinating to me. It's if I'm not on the computer or playing the piano or sitting on the show, I have a book in my hand. And I can't even comprehend what that would be like to not understand a third of the, 30%, almost a third of the book. The
we
story
fill in a lot
exist.
of the holes. Yeah, you end up filling, if you don't have the right intervention, right, the right type of, they call it science of reading intervention, or an Orton-Gillingham approach to reading therapy. It's called reading therapy. That's what that book would end up like as an adult. And right now we have 43 million adults in our country that are functionally illiterate.
That's like 15%. That's 15% of this country.
And there's this fantastic movie that's coming out recently, and it's called what was it called? It'll come to me. The Story of Reading. And over 60% of children in our country right now are not reading on grade level. So what do we think is naturally going to happen to these kids as they become adults? They become adults who are not functionally literate. So there's a big press right now to try to get the education system changed so that the reading is accessible to all. The way that reading is taught is accessible to everybody, not just dyslexics and not just people who, maybe read at a more proficient level.
Does that mean that in the public school system that those who read exceptionally well, like myself, I mean, I can admit this. I know it. It's a fact.
Yeah, sure.
Will be held back and slowed down by those who have to have this additional reading?
No. So the science of reading, the approach to teaching reading, think back in our grandparents' days, they used phonics. Phonics was how you taught reading, and kids could learn to read a lot easier. The approach to teaching dyslexics is a phonics-based approach, which everybody benefits from. So it would not hold anyone back at all. It just reaches more people.
Is it true that the prison system is loaded with primarily illiterate people?
I don't know if it's primarily loaded, but I do know that there's a lot of statistics out there that the juvenile system has a significant amount of dyslexics in there.
So is that directly related to, I mean, have people extrapolated that, saying that this would be directly related to crime?
I don't think it's necessarily directly related to crime. Let me back up a minute, though, and tell you, what does that dyslexic journey look like? So for me, I'm a mental health practitioner. I'm also a clinic coach, and I specialize specifically on helping parents and adults and students who have dyslexia work through not the reading aspect. I get them connected to everybody that they need to help learn to read. My goal is working on all of those emotional pain points that come with dyslexia. So you have a kid, let's just say, you have a kid in elementary school who is dyslexic, and every single day they have this pain point, like think of it like a button being hit every single day. I don't know how to read. I can't read at the same level as my friend. I'm not able to read that chapter book. I'm on this lower level. Every single day that pain button is being pushed. And if we are not cognizant of the mental health of our children who are dyslexic, you end up having a child who has that pain button hit like 20 times a day for years through elementary school. And they just keep getting passed through the system. And so what ends up happening is you end up with a middle schooler who's struggling to read, but now also hitting puberty and struggling with all of those big emotions that come with puberty. You know, it's not that they're driven to crime. Dyslexics are not driven to crime. It's just that you have a bunch of people who end up having a lot of low self-esteem, and they end up dropping out of high school. A lot of dyslexics end up dropping out of high school. Because honestly, like, what's the reward? If you're in school day after day and none of your teachers have helped you learn how to read, and you feel like the idiot in the classroom, what's the reward for staying in? It's really hard for dyslexics to be able to find what is that hook to keep me in school. So for me, as a dyslexia coach, I try to work on all of the mental health and mental wellness and build them with strategies to be able to advocate for themselves so that they don't end up becoming high school dropouts, or they don't end up having all of this, unprocessed shame that could lead them to maybe drug abuse or coping strategies, right? So think drug abuse, alcohol abuse, risky sexual behavior, all of that in high school, that can get you into a lot of trouble.
Interesting. You know, the producer of the show here, his name is Chris. He's extraordinarily successful. I mean, he's the producer of the show and a lot of other stuff here at the studio. And yet, he graduated high school with a second grade reading level because of the dyslexia. He's told me multiple stories about some of the things you just illustrated, you just talked about, that people fall into the trap of various levels of abuse. Different kinds because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then you can end up having kids, right, that grow up into adults that have really poor self-esteem. I have so many adults that come to me for help working through those earlier struggles in life. And guess how they ended up understanding they're dyslexic? Because they have a child who's diagnosed with dyslexia, and all of a sudden the light bulb moment goes off and they're like, I was undiagnosed. I can't believe it. So the path of dyslexics, and I can really speak to this because I'm dyslexic myself. And then I also have a dyslexic child. So I have that, that perspective that from being a parent and having it myself. But then I also have this ability to look at things with a clinical eye so that I can give people strategies and tools to move through and pass those pain points.
Now I know why my mother always said, insanity is what you get from your kids. I get it. I totally
Well, you know what? It's not easy. It's not easy being a parent and having a dyslexic child. And it's not because of behavior or anything like that. Actually, dyslexics are very, very intelligent people. We just have brains. We have what you call a neurobiological difference in the brain, and we read and learn to read in a different way. That's all it is. So
are they more creative because of the way that you read differently? The way you read will affect the way you interpret the world. So are you more creative as a result? Seeing things in a different way?
There's a lot of studies out there that show that dyslexics are a lot more creative, that there's fields where they shine in, a lot of times in architecture, engineering, the arts. I will say myself, I didn't even realize this till a few years ago that other people didn't do this, but the way my brain works, the way I am a good therapist and a fantastic coach is, as people are talking to me, I take in that story three-dimensionally, and I'm creating like a movie in my head of their story and experience that they're telling me. So I have clients return, 6 years later, and they'll say, hey, Kerry, I don't know if you remember me. And then as they start talking, it's almost like I go in my brain, pull out that film, and I just start playing and I can remember. And so it's not like a photographic memory, but it's almost like I'm able to just play back these reels in my head and have a fantastic memory.
I love the whole aspect of film, but we're going to talk about that in just a second. Zoop!
Okay.
You need a doctor?
I am a doctor. I should have died years ago.
People all over the world have my disease.
I'm here to find a cure. We have to push the boundaries, take the risks. If you're gonna run, do it now.
People are strange.
Dr. Michael Morbius, you've been missing for 2 months.
When you're a stranger,
Then you were found on a container ship that washed up off of Long Island.
faces look ugly. When you're alone.
What did you do to yourself, Doctor?
I wish I knew. I went from dying to being more alive than ever.
It worked.
Not exactly. I have increased strength and speed and some form of bat radar. What else can I do?
There are limits. There has to be.
There's something inside of me who wants to hunt and consume blood.
Michael.
When you're strange, faces come
And you control it. I don't know.
Half the city wants to kill you.
remembers your name.
We haven't had anything this good since that thing in San Francisco.
When you're strange,
The other half wants to control you.
Hey, Dr. Mike, you and I should stay in touch.
I'd do anything to save a life. But I don't know what I'm capable of.
You save lives, you don't take them.
Are you here to heal the world? Or to destroy it? Who the hell are you, man?
I know. I'm just kidding. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
Here on the show with me, Geoffrey Hill, we are always looking for new people to come on the show as a guest and share their stories. I love to talk to actors, singers, producers, filmmakers, authors, and tons of other people. If you or somebody you know would be a great guest for my show or any other shows on the network, just go to tvpbn.com/the show prep and fill out the application today. I look forward to seeing you. So I have a friend who is completely deaf. And one day I made the mistake of calling her deafness a handicap. And she emphatically corrected me to say, no, it's you hearing people who have the handicap. You have so much coming in all the time that you can't see the world clearly. And as I'm sitting here thinking about this, I'm thinking, a person who's dyslexic sees the world differently. Do they consider that a handicap? Or do they consider that, like my friend, a blessing that they can see through different eyes?
I think that's a great question. There's a lot of information out there right now with neurodiversity, right? That people who have neurodiverse brains, which includes dyslexics, it includes people with ADHD, it includes people on the autism spectrum disorder, it includes a lot of different diagnoses that just mean our brains work a little differently. It's not broken at all. But here's the problem. If we don't use that term disability, then we don't get to have protection under IDA. We don't have protection under the Disability Rights Act. So we need to be able to say with confidence, yes, dyslexia is a disability, especially when you're going through academia. right?
Yeah.
But here's the difference, is that you can see the world differently. We do know that there's all these fantastic ways that we shine and we think creatively. Who is it? The guy who owns Virgin Airlines. He's completely dyslexic.
Richard Branson, he is. That was my next question is, are there any significantly wealthy, successful people that are
so many people out there? Yeah, so dyslexics, one of our gifts, look, we are not detail-oriented people. Like, well, at least me. Let me talk for myself. I am not detail-oriented. I actually can read quite fast. But the reason why is because I just skim over all the details. I'm a big picture person. Like, I can read that book at the same speed as you. All those little details, I won't care about reading the book. But I'll still have the plot and everything down. That we take into the world. We are big picture thinkers, right? And kind of think of, not just Richard Branson, but something
How about
just
the
popped
producer
up.
of the show, Chris Mayberry?
Can you hear me?
I hear you, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You can't hear me?
Oh, I lost you. Can you hear me?
No.
I can't hear you. Okay, there you are.
So
sorry, I hear you now.
Maybe it was just my mic or, I don't know, the way I'm
No,
holding
can
my-
you edit that out?
No, it's okay. It's a dyslexic show. Things are going to happen.
Things are going to happen. So anyways, what ends up happening is that we as dyslexics end up having this big world picture. And when we're looking at the world in this big view, we bring a lot of benefits. The problem becomes when we're stuck in school and academia and we aren't able to shine because we're stuck learning how to read all the time. So our strengths don't shine when we're younger. They shine a lot when we're older if we can get through school and have our self-esteem intact.
I can understand that. It's kind of like when you have that thought in your head that you have to get out before you can move to the next thought. And then the people around you talk so much they won't let you get the thought out. So then they're like, oh, he has nothing to say. And you're like, yeah, well, I haven't finished my first thought.
Yeah. Right.
And so then you discredit that person thinking that there's just nothing available. And that person gets kicked under the rug. All because we didn't shut our mouths long enough to listen for them to get their thought out.
Mm-hmm. And they could have something really profound to say, right? But they're kind of building that thought. And what they have to say might be so much more important than everybody else blathering around them. But people oftentimes, they don't stop long enough to make room for people who think a little bit differently or who see the world a little bit differently. And I don't know, it'd be kind of nice if we made a little bit more space for everybody.
I completely understand that. I teach a class from time to time, and I really endeavor to create those silent moments. Rather than just machine gunning the lecture the entire time, I want to stop, and I intentionally do this. I'll put something on the PowerPoint screen, and I just stand there. The first time I did that, it was so uncomfortable because no one is used to a teacher just staring at you. But yet, I know what's going on. They're thinking, wondering. Some of them are like, what's he staring at us? Some of them are sitting there saying, oh, this is my thought. The silence is golden now. I can hear myself think. Mm-hmm. Some of them are reading the board. But it's the silence that delivers the message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the intentional pause. I use that all the time in coaching and then also in my therapy practice as well. The intentional pause where you're giving people enough time to soak in the information and then be able to mull it over as well, not just kind of throw information at them.
And I would also think that a person who is dyslexic would really require that extra time to think, to process what they just read, to hash it out. Is this really what I read? Or did I read it differently? To think two or three different, to run simulations, in other words. Mm-hmm. And then, because they've been shoved under the rug so frequently, have the courage to raise their hand and comment on that. That whole process is not an instantaneous thing. They need time.
Mm-hmm. It's not instantaneous, and then add to that the anxiety that maybe the teacher's going to call on them to read, the anxiety of, oh, these kids all have their hand up before me. I mean, if you add in all of those different, think back to elementary school, you really just want to fit in, and then go to middle school where you really want to fit in and not stand out the way people think it doesn't always fit into the regular classroom. Let's just put it that way. Doesn't mean that we don't have a lot to say. It just means that it would be great for a little bit of, like you were saying, that pause. One of the cool things I do, I started off my advocacy for dyslexia. I am a channel swimmer, which means I swim stupid distances in open water. And my goal is to raise awareness of the strengths and then also the struggles of dyslexics. And so those are some of the things I highlight by doing ridiculous swims that are actually like super duper fun, but it raises awareness. Like people are like, why would you swim 20 miles? That's crazy. Oh, well, actually, you know what? I've got a lot of grit and resiliency because I am dyslexic. I learned that from elementary school all the way through college. I was building grit and resiliency. So I'm ready to take on that channel swim.
You know, we have a caller here who we can't see him on the screen, but Chris is going to pick up his headset and call in, because Chris has a great deal of experience in this world of dyslexia. And we want to hear from him if he picks up his headset and calls me real quick.
Call us, Chris.
I know that he has questions on this for you because he's sitting back there chomping at the bit. So this morning we have a caller. His name is Chris Mayberry. He's the producer. You can't see him, but we can hear him. And he has questions. He's got questions.
I can't hear him. Am I supposed to hear him?
Click the letter A and the letter M on your input, Chris. And he's actually back in the control room.
There we are.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Now I hear you.
Yes, I'm the voice in the sky. No, I was just I'm writing Jeff notes and different things. Excuse me. No, it was interesting because you're just talking about my schooling, and it was like he said, you know, I graduated with a second grade reading level and just got pushed through school, but I had all sorts of, I did really well socially and everything, and it wasn't like I was trodden down, but it was really hard getting through school because teachers looked at you, all right, here, you're in the special reading group. It's special because you're special. I go, no, we're stupid. Thank you. And we knew we were. And that was always the hardest part, was dealing with that stigma that was coming from our extremely helpful teachers. But I see it as a blessing now because I'm extremely artistic. I look at all my daughters because they're all dyslexic and they're all like super artistic. And so it's not a bad thing, as so many people call it, but it is actually a blessing. Just nobody sees it, like you said, until later in life.
Right. And going through school that's not, I had someone tell me this once, and I thought this was such a great analogy. The worst thing that could have ever happened to dyslexics is the invention of the printing press, because we took learning hands-on in all different ways in society and apprenticeships, and we made learning a one-stop shop. Like you could only learn in one way, which is to sit in a desk, read, write, look at the board. And if you were to instead look at all the different strengths of kids in the classroom and teach to those strengths how they learn, then every child's going to have a chance to shine. But you know what, Chris? I have a question for you. Okay, can you still hear me?
Oh, yes, I can.
Let's hold that question, though. Hold that question.
Okay.
And we're going to go talk to some sponsors really quick, and then we'll come back and ask that question.
Okay, sounds good.
Ah, yes. Come in.
So I have
Madamania knows what you want. Madamania knows all.
that's great.
You want an audience to watch your short films.
No, actually, I need...
You want to market your successful podcast.
No, I actually...
You want to live stream video games.
Actually, I want to be able to do it all at once in front of a live audience.
I want to be able to do it all the time. No. You want to be able to do it all at the same time. Okay, I got it. See? Madam Mania knows the solution.
just kidding. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
So you had a question for Chris. Chris is the producer, and he is back in the control room. That's why we can't see him.
Okay, Chris, so this is a question for you. Let me give you a little bit of lead up, though. So a lot of adults that I work with that are dyslexic, who are working through those pain points, a lot of them that have been successful adults can look back and realize that they had a single, maybe multiple, but at least one area, which I call an island of expertise. So what does that mean? It means like when you're in the room with a bunch of people, there's that one topic where you are the expert in the room. So for me, that was swimming growing up. Like I was like the swimmer in the room. I could talk about techniques. I could talk about fly. I could talk about how you turn and push off the wall. Throw me in a pool with most of my classmates. I would crush them in the water. So that was my area where I got confidence. When I work with parents, I teach them how can you build an island of expertise with your child. Find something they like and then really, really encourage them a lot to not just build on it, but to become the expert in the room. So Chris, my question for you is, yes, you had a second grade reading level, but what was that island of expertise you had that made you stand out and helped you get through those difficult years?
I bet you Jeff could answer that too. He probably knows. It was cooking. I started cooking.
Really? I dropped my earbud. I'm listening. Cooking.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, cooking. Okay.
I started cooking at 8 years old, and from there on, it was what I did. It was my freedom. It was my expression, and let me tell you, all my friends loved it because, from middle school till even now. People always call me and ask me cook questions. All my kids ask me cook questions. I've been a professional chef and a journeyman baker for years, and that was my thing because I didn't have to read. I could read the recipe, I could understand it, but then and I can just I can like watch a video on Yummy or whatever it is on the internet and see it and go, oh yeah, I can make that, and I can just go and do it. And so. That is my area.
So that's your island of expertise. And so if we can encourage our children to have these islands of expertise where they can sit in the classroom and know they can't read, but also know, well, little Charlie Bob over here, he sure as hell can't cook lobster risotto like I can, in fourth grade. If we can do that, what we're doing is we're building these areas of confidence and islands of expertise that help kind of balance out all of those struggles and pain points so that child has an area in that classroom to feel like an expert. And by the way, Chris, I have to tell you, when the pandemic first hit, my son he was in grade 7 at the time, he took Gordon Ramsay's master class, and then he took his master class too. So I also have a cook, and I get a lot of good food.
That's cool. Awesome. That whole lobster risotto sounds delectable.
It was our Christmas dinner. So my son now, he is a 15-year-old in high school, and he makes Christmas dinner every year for us. And so last year it was beef Wellington. I think that's right, Chris. That's the one with the puff pastry on the outside.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So he knocked out a beef Wellington for a table of 10. And then the year before it was the lobster butternut squash risotto. So that's like his thing, Christmas Day. And
so he's 13 years old. He makes lobster butternut squash risotto.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, my big claim to fame is feeding prime rib dinner to 500 people in the middle of the wilderness.
Oh, he's done that a lot.
That's a good claim. That's a really good claim to fame.
He's done that a lot, and I've eaten it a lot, and it's really, really good.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, when the truck shows up with all that stuff on there, everybody goes like this, and it's delectable. I mean, to be able to come up with a prime rib in the middle of nowhere, we hardly even have water.
That's impressive. That's so impressive. I do want to add, though, too, it's not just that dyslexics are really good at the creative stuff like cooking. We're actually like really, really smart. So for example, my son, he had that proper remediation that Chris and I never got growing up, right? We did not get the reading therapy that kids need. My son did. He went to a school for dyslexia. He got that remediation. He is now at a college prep high school. He just made the honor roll and got all straight A's. So like people need to wrap their head around that sometimes because they don't understand that you can have a learning disability and also be gifted and talented. So we call that 2E, twice exceptional.
What does proper reading remediation look like? I mean, I never attended that stuff at all.
So, you know, I'm not a reading therapist, but I can tell you from just all of my clients' experiences what this looks like. It means that you're taught based on phonics, and everything is broken down. So you're taught what every single letter sounds like, how those letters come together. So for an adult who wants to go through reading therapy, I mean, they're kind of brought all the way back to the beginning and taught what noise does O make together? How do you recognize a silent E at the end of the word? You know, I don't know if you did this, Chris, but I was notorious for reading the beginning of the word and just guessing the hell out of the rest of it and hoping I was right.
You know, I have a question. I've thought on that. Like, now
Okay.
my thoughts just went dyslexic. I learned to speak Korean. And in order for me to learn to speak Korean, I mean, I grew up speaking English, but in order for me to speak Korean, I had to look at the alphabet. The very first thing they said was, learn to read the alphabet. And I said, wow, this is just nothing but chicken scratch. How am I going to read this? And they said, well, you know, this makes this sound, that makes that sound. And we went through, it was weeks of learning the sounds for that.
Okay.
And so as you're talking about this and remembering when you said like a double O says oo, well, the same thing in Korean, this particular symbol says oo. Is dyslexia something we find primarily in a Western language? Because in Korea, that symbol only says oo and it never says anything else. It doesn't say ah, r, oo. It always says, it's only one sound. There's no, in German there's diphthongs. They change the sound. There's none of that in Korea. None.
So dyslexia is actually worldwide. So think of it this way. It's not just, so dyslexia is attaching that sound to the letter, right? But then it's also the ability to hold in your memory that sound that's attached to the letter. Now the next letter sound, and the next letter sound, and the next letter sound. So that you could have like, you know, like my last name, Yanushanus, right? Halfway through, if you're dyslexic, you may not be able to remember what were those beginning letters to recognize the word. So when we have kids who are learning to read, they might see the word cat, C-A-T, and they might recognize it.
Yeah.
But guess what? 10 minutes later, you could show them that word cat, and they may not recognize it. So it's really fascinating. Dyslexia actually means word blindness, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, even as a dyslexic, I'm like, how does that work that we just saw the word cat, but now we can't recognize it again?
Wow, this would make it incredibly difficult for someone who grew up reading Chinese when there are tens of thousands of iterations of those Chinese characters. We have 26 letters in our alphabet. They have tens of thousands.
So guess what language my son is taking? Bam, Mandarin. Can you believe it? And he is working his tail off, but it's because he has that grit and resiliency. He's actually getting better grades in the class than some kids who have people in their family that speak Mandarin. So that goes back to, like, dyslexics have all these internal strengths and drive and grit if we help them harness it. But going back to elementary school, I do want to tell you an interesting story. So we're talking about the phonics, and you're talking about Korea. Here's where some problems surface. So a lot of the early education books that are trying to teach kids how to read have pictures, right?
Yeah.
So it might say the fox is in the tree. And if the child's trying to read it and they're like, the cat, the teacher will say, why don't you look at the picture? What animal is that? right? So they're getting all of these visual cues, but getting those visual cues doesn't relate to understanding the phonemic awareness, understanding that sound that goes with the letters. So that's one of the big mistakes in our reading system, is that kids are very dependent on the pictures. And so it looks like they're reading, but they're really not.
So if you change the font, does that make it more difficult for them to read it? I mean, you get used to seeing the word fox a certain way. Then now it's more curlicued. I mean, obviously, if it's like a heavy curlicue, a lot of people just can't read cursive. But what if it's just slightly different? Does that make a difference?
That's a really good question. I do know that a lot of dyslexics are encouraged to write in cursive. So because there's a flow to it, so the letters kind of naturally flow into each other. But they still are able to read print, right? So they would also be able to read the cursive. However, there is this very cool, I want to say he started off as in graphic art, and he's dyslexic, and he's in Europe. I want to say he's Danish. Maybe he'll kill me, I don't know. But he actually came up with a font for dyslexics that helps make things a little bit easier to read. So the science is still a little bit out on if it's 100%, or if the efficacy is there, but a lot of people have said it has helped them tremendously. So they put maybe Word docs into that typeface, and it makes it a little bit easier for them to read.
Hey, Chris just wrote a note on my teleprompter, and it says, cursive is from hell.
Well, here's the deal. I make sure parents know this. So there is sometimes a heavy push for kids to learn cursive. And this is not just for dyslexics. This is for elementary kids in elementary school. There's this heavy push for them to learn cursive. And I will tell you that my son is also dysgraphic, which means messy handwriting and, doesn't have necessarily that fine motor control. And cursive was a nightmare for him. And finally, I just said, we're done. I understand, it works for a lot of kids. We're done. It is not working for you. And so I just had to really be that parent advocate and let the teachers know it was a good shot. We did a good run with cursive, but we're going back. We're going back to print. And that's okay. Everybody's allowed to be different and unique.
I grew up reading and writing cursive. Then I went to high school, and the drafting teacher said, cursive is outlawed in my class. From now on, you will write with the ANSI standard, just plain, boring capital letters in everything. I even forgot how to write lowercase. It was very difficult.
Really interesting.
Yeah, because I wanted those A's, and I discovered that I'm not very good at math. Math is really difficult for me, but creative stuff is really easy. And I discovered that I could take a drafting class. I got straight A's without even knowing how to do the math, because I could conceptualize the answer in my head, and then I wrote all the letters perfectly. But I can relate to that.
So guess what? My son writes in block letters, all capital block letters, just like drafters do. And that was the solution for his writing. And it's legible and beautiful, and not beautiful. I'm not going to go totally over the top, but I mean, it's legible now. The cursive didn't work for him, but that same system that you used worked for you. When I was in junior high and high school, I ended up moving because of my dad's job to Egypt. And I was put in Arabic class. So can you imagine, we're talking about the alphabet here and writing. Can you imagine being dyslexic and being put into an Arabic class and having to learn how to read and write in Arabic? And a completely different alphabet there. And it's like, I think you said in German, the diphthongs. We have a bunch of those in Arabic too that go over the letters.
I remember before I went to Korea, I lived there for a couple years. Before I went to Korea, reading and writing English was fairly simple. I mean, I still sucked at English essays. Essay writing in school was my absolute worst class. There's nothing worse than writing essays on demand. That's hell. But then I got sent to Korea. I'm over there speaking the language and writing the language, and I learned it and I excelled at it. It was easy for me. Then I came home and realized that I couldn't understand the English that I was reading. And ever since then, I've had a lot of trouble. Like if I read the Bible, for example. I remember before going to Korea, reading the Bible was simple. I mean, it was English. Now I come home and I am frequently confused at the meaning of a verse. What are they saying? What is this language? Like for example, in in English we say the word nay. In the Bible it says nay. Nay means no. But in Korea, nay means yes. So I came home confused when I would see the word nay in the Bible, and it changes the meaning of everything. So on a very small scale, I can somewhat understand that. By learning this one, I forgot that one.
You forgot that one. I can tell you one of my, I talk about pain points a lot. One of my biggest pain points, I love Egypt. That is like my second home. I went back and I taught there for a long, long time. I love Egypt, but one of my biggest pain points from high school was somehow I passed Arabic 1, don't even ask me how, and I'm in Arabic 2, and I know I can't do this test. Like, I just know I tried, I studied, I tried my best. The teacher's passing out the copies of the test on each desk and gets to me and hands me my copy, and I go to write my name on it, and I look, and every single answer was filled in. And so I was confused. So I went up to her desk and I said, everything's written in on this. I think you gave me your master copy. And she goes, no. She's like, no, just take it. You're okay. And at that moment, I knew she knew I was too stupid to be able to do her test. She gave me a test already filled in her handwriting. Can you imagine the amount of shame that washes over a kid? And then I'm looking at my class and they've heard this conversation. And so now the whole class knows. In my mind, I mean, I know now I'm not dumb, but in my mind, they all, like, I've been exposed. Like, that stupidity, that sense of shame, it is just out there open for everyone to see. That is one of my biggest pain points. So I think a lot of kids with dyslexia have those.
That is really a wow moment. I can't even imagine somebody filling in my test. Like, that would be kind of insulting. Oh, you're not good enough to do this. I did it for you.
I did it for you, and just go sit down. You're okay. Just go sit down. And the shock and the shame, and then having to show up every day to class, and face her, and it was awful.
Well, and then the things other students would say, so the teacher's pet, she's going to do all your work now? And they don't understand.
Or they would just be like, you don't have to work as hard as we do, and why don't you have to do the work? Things like that. It was awful, absolutely awful. And then also too, I don't know, Chris, I think you said that you had been pulled out of class a lot. Like, I was always pulled out for that one study class. It was never reading remediation, which is what I needed, but I was pulled out for that study class. And I don't know if you're familiar with the book, the author David Sedaris, but he has the funniest chapter in his book all about how he used to get pulled out for speech. And so this is how I was, for my study class. You're looking at the clock and you're supposed to go at 11:35. It's 11:30, you're waiting for 11:35. And it's 11:34 and the teacher says, Kerry, aren't you supposed to be in class right now, in study class? And you're like, oh, okay. But the next day you get out at 11:34 and she'll say, nope, sit down, Kerry. It's not time yet. You have 1 more minute left. And so David Sedaris writes this whole funny, humorous essay all about how he's trying just to blend in class, and that 1 minute difference of leaving or not leaving or staying, and how much embarrassment was brought on him by that. So I think a lot of kids who are pulled out can recognize and relate to that. There's a lot of relatable things with dyslexia.
Wow, I only got pulled out of class one time. That's because I told the teacher I was so angry that I was going to make sure she got fired. I ended up going to the principal's office, and I was in second grade, and I have never forgotten that. This has been very, very, very interesting. I had no idea. When I read the show notes, I'm like, dyslexia, I know nothing about this. Wow, this will be a short episode, and here it is, 49 minutes. I really appreciate you coming on here, sharing this with me, and educating those people who don't know anything about it, and those who do, where they should go, or where can they get some help.
Well, they can look me up. I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, Kerry on Coaching Dyslexia. And then I also have a website, Kerry on Coaching, and it's spelled the Irish way, Kerry.
Kerry on
Coaching.
On Coaching. KerryOnCoaching.com.
Mm-hmm. Kerry on Coaching.
KerryOnCoaching. KerryOnCoaching.com. Very, very good. Well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Folks and friends at home, if you can't read, make sure you go to KERRYONCoaching.com. Get some help for yourself. It's not over until you choose it to be over. Until next time, I'm your host, Geoffrey Hill, and I love you all.